you are going to the worst places and seeing some horrible things, but you are also perhaps one of the few people that is able to see what life is like, and changes you. It changes what you think is important in life and how the values that really matter. So for me, it grabbed me on so many levels. And I think that having been a war correspondent, having seen, so much of what I've seen, may have put me in a better position when I was finally injured. And I so often asked myself, when I saw people injured, like I was injured, and I'd seen many people who had been injured like me before, people lose their lives, and I always asked myself, how would I react? What if I was the guy on the gurney? And you never know. You've no idea. And I've seen people react in very different ways. And look, I'm incredibly proud of how I did handle it, and amazed that I managed to find the strength never to want to give up and just to want to keep going. But I always wondered what it would be like if it were me. And then one day it was.
I always thought these war reporters were crazy, these correspondents that are, they've got things falling around them. They could die. It's scary stuff. Benjamin Hall, he's the author of the #1 bestseller book, Saved, A War Reporter's Mission to Make It Home. He's a longtime war correspondent for Fox News, covers conflicts around the world, and including for Fox, he has written for several newspapers, including the New York Times and the BBC. He lives with his wife and 4 daughters in London. He joins us from Washington, D.C. today. Benjamin, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to be with you.
Yeah. Now we're here to talk about your latest book, Resolute, How We Humans Keep Finding Ways to Beat the Odds, the Toughest Odds. And now this is the follow-up to the Saved book, which chronicles your near-death experience while covering the war in Ukraine in 2022, where you were hit by a Russian missile. Let's start right there with, wow, that's something else. Tell us about that attack that nearly ended your life.
Well, it'll be the anniversary in a few days, and it's always a day which, makes me think a lot, makes me think about life, makes me think about God, and I try to relive that day quite often, because I think when you go through something so terrible, rather than run away from it, you should always look up to it. You should remember it. You should learn from it. And so I remember that day very, very clearly, to be honest. We were covering the beginning of the conflict in Ukraine. Russian forces were surrounding Kyiv, and me and my Fox News team were just outside in a town called Harrowing, totally abandoned. And we were driving back through an abandoned checkpoint, and we were targeted. And the first shell landed 30 feet in front of us. We quickly tried to reverse the car, and a few seconds later, the second one landed just next to the car. And that one blacked me out totally, and I got shrapnel in the eye at that point, and I was, in one sense, gone. The world went totally black and totally peaceful. And into this darkness, I saw my daughter, my 7-year-old daughter, on. And she said to me, Daddy, you have to get out of the car. You have to get out of the car. And it brought me back, and I opened my eyes, and the world came rushing back to me. There were some flames, and I reached for the door of the car, and I took one step out of the car, and the next shell hit the car itself. And I was saved in that moment by my family and by my daughter. But it threw me away, and I woke up. I was unconscious for a bit, and I woke up, and I was on fire. My right leg was gone, and I was rolling on the floor trying to put out the flames. And then just began this 40 minutes where no one knew where we were, and I was trying to figure out a way of staying alive. Sadly, the rest of my team died that day. The other 3 people died. The other 4 people died that day. But I wrote a lot about what happened that day in my first book, Saved, but what I didn't really go into, and what Resolute is about, is trying to talk about how I found the strength to continue, to stay alive, to never give up hope. Because at no point during, say, those 40 minutes, or for the next few days when the evacuation was very difficult and no pain meds, not for one single point did I ever think it was over. I told myself I was going to get home. However I was going to do, if I was going to drag myself, I was going to get home. And I wanted in this new book, Resolute, to really try and figure out how how when you are in the worst, darkest place, you can find the resilience to do that. And that's what I've tried to write in this book, and it was the beginning of a journey which I continue to go through. Shrapnel in the eye, and my left thumb gone, burnt across my body, my left foot gone, my right leg gone below the knee, and so a lot of injuries. And it's you could have two ways to go about it after that. One is to think that your life is gone and that the way you knew yourself is over. The other one is to say, I am still alive today, and I was saved by God, and I will make sure that every moment from here on is going to be worth it, and I won't waste a second because I'm so lucky. Let's go out in the name of the people who died that day. Let's keep their lives going. Let's work for them. Let's live for them. And so I have ended up being an incredibly optimistic person. I haven't been held down by what happened today. I am closer to my family, closer to God, closer to my work. I just think that everything now is so much more important. And I think maybe before I took it for granted. And again, what I write about in the book is how you can grow strength through struggle. The difficult moments are almost seem impossible, but if you get through them, that you will be a stronger person on the other side.
Why don't you, I know that you want to honor your colleagues that passed on. Tell us about them.
Well, Pierre Zakrzewski was our cameraman, someone I'd worked with for many, many years. We'd covered every conflict zone around the world, and he was just the most incredible journalist and storyteller and a brother to me. And I learned so much from him. Then there was Sasha, our 21-year-old Ukrainian fixer as well. And she was doing what she could to help her country. And she knew that by showing journalists around, by telling the stories of the war, that was her way of helping Ukraine. They died that day, and so did the two Russian military escorts who were with us as well. So, the four others died, and I try as often as I can just to remember them and just talk about them.
That's wonderful. I so appreciate that you do that, and you remember Peter and Sasha and their role that they played. And when I saw the photo of the car was when I could no longer breathe. My breath was literally taken away. To see that God preserved your life through that, because there was literally nothing left of that car. And yet here you are speaking to us today. So what a remarkable story. And as I read the book, I literally couldn't put it down. You are a storyteller, and this is the story of what God has done for you, and a reminder that he can do that for us as well. I mean, it seems like all of us go through some sort of trauma, maybe not to the extent that you have. And speaking of that extent, you had a moment. You've had a lot of moments, but this is the moment where the doctor in the Ukraine that took care of you, you had an opportunity to go back and see him again. Not that you remembered him, but that he remembered you. Can you tell us about that meeting?
Yeah, very, very early on. I was recovering, first of all, in, I went after a few days to Poland, then I went to Landstuhl, a US base in Germany, and then I was in Texas at San Antonio for 6 months. At the Center for the Intrepid at the Brooke Army Medical Center. But it was almost as soon as I got there, within only a week or two, my consciousness was sort of coming back, that I knew I wanted to go back to Ukraine. That I knew that I mustn't hide from what happened, that I wanted to go back. And much of my recovery was leading up to the time when I would go back. And first of all, I had to get my wife's approval for me to go back. That was
I was going to say, first of all, that's amazing that she said, yeah, okay.
Well, there hadn't been that many strikes for a while on Kyiv. And so my wife finally said, okay, you're going to go in for one day. President Zelensky asked me to come and interview him as well. And so I said, this is an opportunity I have to do. But the day before we got there, all of the missiles started dropping again. And my wife was just saying, I'm not sure this is the right decision. And I said to her, I need to go back for a few reasons. First of all, I need to know that, when you are knocked down, you must get right back up. And I felt that this journey going back was an opportunity to do that. It was to say, I haven't been stopped. I haven't been changed. And the Russians tried to silence journalists that day. Pierre and Sasha died, and I wanted to go back and say, you haven't silenced us. I will keep reporting. I will come back. And so it was an important message for me, both personally, to go back and to look in the eye, look at the place, of the attack, as well as a sign for journalism. But when I was evacuated, a few days after the attack, I had to take this 10-hour train ride out of Ukraine, and it was brutal. I had no pain meds. I had a traumatic brain injury. I couldn't think, but my thoughts were everywhere. I just learned that Pierre and Sasha had died, and I was on this train, and I had to find this extra level of strength on that train. It was really like going to hell and back. And I learned a number of different experiences. First of all, when you think the pain was too big, I found a way of turning my mind and saying, you can get through this one. You got to find the strength. And amazingly found that with your mind so attuned to what you've got to do and getting through it, you could stop the physical pain as much, or at least bring it down. And so those 10 hours on that train were awful. And I wanted to relive that. And we actually took the same train when we went back to Ukraine, a year and a half later. And I laid down in the same position on a similar kind of bed when I went back, and I closed my eyes. And I said, I'm never going to hide from what happened. I want to relive those experiences. And after 10 hours, we got into Kyiv, and I remember taking one step off the train, and this incredible emotion came over me, and I felt the sense that, you are completing your journey. You are back again. And it felt like I had just broken through a wall to do so. So we went and we met with the doctor who treated me. And this is originally, it was on a tiny little forward operating base, and he treated me, and he was also outside guarding the hospital with his AK and then doing surgery on me at the same time. And I saw him, and he burst into tears, and he just said, there is no way. We never thought that you would survive. Your injuries were so bad. We didn't think you were going to survive. And to see you here standing up so strong and doing so well was just, really emotional for both of us. And it was an incredible moment to experience that. And, I think the one lesson is that never hide, never run from the difficult moments. Look them straight in the eye and say, I will beat back every single one of you, and I will keep going, and I will be stronger because of it. And I think the doctor and I both shared that experience.
I think that's something all of us who have experienced some sort of trauma should hear about going back. My husband and I had an accident, rolled off the side of a canyon, and a couple broken body parts. And we went back a year later and just faced that down. And he was kind of like, why would you want to do that? And I'm like, I cannot let this fear overpower me for the rest of my life. Yeah. I've got to go and see it. So I appreciate what you're saying, and I in no way compare that to what you did. Your story just reveals the great determination, the heroism that it takes to be a wartime journalist. So tell us how this became your career, if you would. Back us up a little bit.
Well, Crackle Fritz, you said stupid and we were crazy. It's probably
I
true.
didn't say stupid. Crazy.
Oh my goodness.
Crazy.
Crazy's different than stupid.
Yeah, no, you're not, I think you're very intelligent. I just can't imagine doing what you're doing. Yeah.
You know what?
Right.
No, but what I was going to say was that when I first began, I was young, and I wanted a career. I wanted something that would take me around the world, that would be adventurous, that I could go and meet people and see places I'd never seen. And I remember, the first couple of times I went to Iraq, first of all, and we didn't see much conflict, but I really enjoyed the stories. And then I remember finally in Libya, we were in the front lines, we'd managed to sort of get ourselves, I bartered my way onto this little illegal weapons shipment, I think this little boat across the Mediterranean, bobbing up and down in the middle of the night. And there we saw some really tough conflict. And it was at that point that I finally realized what it was to cover conflict. And it was at that point that I was so drawn to it, because the thing about war, we think of all the terrible things. We think of the pain and the suffering and the loss. And that's the primary thing. But you also see side by side with that, you see courage and bravery and kindness and people sacrificing and helping each other. And I was just so amazingly grabbed by the only place that I'd seen the real, emotions like that so at the surface. And I just wanted to keep talking and telling those stories. And because war doesn't just exist, it exists on so many levels. It exists, for example, on the level of a family who have lost their home, and they might have lost someone close. But then it also exists in a regional level. It exists in a geopolitical level. It exists on a financial level. It works its way up. And war has all of these things going on at once together. It's such sort of a complicated thing. And, it lays bare the very basics of what human nature is. What makes people want more or be cruel or want to conquer? What makes people, well, we know what makes people want to protect what they've got. And these raw emotions, you see only in disaster. And it's the strange thing about our career is that, you are going to the worst places and seeing some horrible things. But, you are also perhaps one of the few people that is able to see what life is like and changes you. It changes what you think is important in life and how the values that really matter. So for me, it grabbed me on so many levels. And I think that having been a war correspondent, having seen, so much of what I've seen, may have put me in a better position when I was finally injured. And I so often asked myself when I saw people injured, like I was injured, and I'd seen many people who had been injured like me before, and people lose their lives, and I always asked myself, how would I react? What if I was the guy on the gurney? And you never know. You've no idea. And I've seen people react in very different ways. And look, I'm incredibly proud of how I did handle it, and amazed that I managed to find the strength never to want to give up and just to want to keep going. But I always wondered what it would be like if it were me. And then one day it was.
And then one day it was.
Wow.
I think what you do and what the career you have built is so vital in influencing people with the truth of what's going on. So easy for us to just go with a blind eye and think it doesn't bother me, so I can turn my head away. But you're the one who helps us turn our heads towards what needs to change and the fact that things can change. So I love that that's like our career in media. Every time I have an opportunity to be in front of a microphone, it never escapes me that this has the power to change a life. So thank you for what you do. Thank your wife for what you do. And just the reality of what you've gone through. So this book so eloquently portrays that life. And I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's essential more than ever that journalism, we must always see what's happening around the world. I think many people take their lives for granted. And, we live in a globalized world. And I think we've got to keep talking about it. And look, there's lots to be said about what social media is doing and whether, where we should really get our news now. And I think now it's more important than ever to just be watching established networks, real journalists, because you just don't know anymore. If you pick up your phone, you look on X, I'm never certain what that is or who's posted that video, what it is. And so more than ever, I want to rely on journalists who have a reputation, who are there seeing the story, in real life. I think that they're absolutely essential. And the other amazing thing is that every story I ever told, you go to a story and you think that you know it, you have an idea, you've done some research, and you get there, and it is always different. There is always something you hadn't expected. There are always an element that it takes you by surprise, and so you've got to be there. You've got to be there to tell that story.
You mentioned her earlier, Alicia, your wife. Go ahead. I'd love to hear a little bit more about her. She was so essential to your recovery. Tell us a little more. Go a little deeper.
Yeah, look, Alicia and I were at school together when we were 6, and
That's precious.
And we then went our separate ways, and we sort of met again when I was probably about 30 or so. And she's not a journalist. She wasn't that sort of attached to geopolitics or this or that. She's actually quite different. She worked for a shoe company. She's half Australian, half English. But, you know, relationships are different. You know, whichever relationship is different. And some people want to be with someone who is exactly the same as them and loves the same things. And for me, I needed someone to come back to, someone who I could be close to, who maybe so that I didn't bring the horrors and everything I saw back home. I wanted the safety. I wanted the family. And I always wanted lots of kids. And Alicia was just a perfect counterweight to me. But she's also the strongest person I know. And when I was injured, she was the one that kept the family together. She was the one that for the 7 months I was away, she kept that to a real routine and a rhythm. And there wasn't a single second that she faltered in any way. And so many people tell the story about me. Like, I was injured, oh, it's affected you, but it affects the entire family. I mean, the impact it's had on Alicia and at home and the things I can and can't do are immense. But there hasn't been a single second when Alicia hasn't just stepped up to the plate and said, no problem, you can't do that, I'll do that. And actually, it happened in an amazing way, a very sad way, about a year ago, when at middle of the night at home, we were broken into and 2 burglars came into our house downstairs. And I don't have my legs on. And Alicia was pregnant at the time. And she jumped up and she ran downstairs and she scared away these burglars. And I'm trying to strap on my legs and I'm trying to get out of bed. And she went down and protected the house. And what an incredibly strong, remarkable woman for just doing that to protect the household. But one of the few things that really hurt me a little bit, because that was my role. I was supposed to protect the family. That's what I always did. And it was one of those moments where I realized, wow, one of the things that these injuries have changed is my ability to do that. But she stepped in, and I came down the stairs, 5 minutes later, like hobbling, trying to get down quickly. and they've gone. They've left. They've actually screamed at them, and they jumped out the window, luckily, and left the house. But I mean, it was an amazing moment that just reminded me what an incredible woman Alicia is, but also how times have changed and how there are some things and roles that have to change because of my injuries. But never for a second has Alicia even questioned that. And boy, do you need family? Do you need community when you get through things like this? And I've often spoken to my doctors. One of the things that I was amazed at is that they often said to me, when people are injured like you're injured, you go in 2 directions. I spoke to many soldiers who lose their identity, who get PTSD, who struggle really hard because what the person they knew has been taken away from them, and they can't figure out who they are. And they go in a bad way. The other half come out like I've come out, really optimistic, and they think life is better than before, and they're so appreciative of it. And I kept asking doctors, what is it? Why do some people have that resilience and others don't? And they all came down to the one thing: it's those who have had and been surrounded by community and family, who have people fighting for them and people who they fight for. They're the ones who almost always manage to get through it well. If you come from a broken home, some soldiers do. If you come from a place that is, you don't have that, that often, they said, makes the difference between those who come out of traumatic events strongly and those who don't. And so it really is family. And I think that I am so strong and have come through it because of Alicia and the rest of my family.
That's beautiful. I love that.
I just want to make a side comment about the smile on your face when you talk to her and say her name. It's just beaming.
That's sweet.
Yeah.
So we're talking with Benjamin Hill this morning, and how we as humans can find ways to beat the toughest odds and Resolute here. And why don't we talk about, you said you put your legs on, to discuss your injuries. What are you dealing with?
Well, it's my right leg is gone from the knee down. That's actually strangely one of the easiest injuries. You pop a prosthetic on, and you can make that work. The nerve issues, etc. But I was very badly burnt from the waist down, and the burns are really difficult. I'm skin grafted, from the waist down, and most of my left leg, part of it's gone, and my left foot is largely gone. And that's really difficult, so trying to find a way. There's always discussions about having the left foot amputated as well, which I may do because it would give you a bit more freedom, but then you have 2 prosthetics. So so I have prosthetics on both sides because of that. And then, I only see out of one eye because I lost a fair chunk of my eye through shrapnel, holes in my skull. And of course, my left hand has been sort of put back together with a bunch of hip bones. So I can't move the thumb. But I can sort of grab some things. And then, of course, I had a traumatic brain injury, and I still sort of notice that. I write about that in Resolute, and there are just some times when I just find it really difficult to put some facts together, to sort of really recall things in the way that I could. And it's not big. But it was a big learning curve to learn that I just needed to find a way around that. And I now have, a total list of things, whatever I'm doing, really breaking down where I'm going, who I'm speaking to. And that's a solution. It works for me. But that was something which I was really worried about because, you can take away my limbs, but I wanted to be able to walk and communicate and talk. And so that was the thing that I started working at quickly. So those are the injuries, but they don't really define me in any way now. I talk in the book about how people react differently to you, and I find that quite amazing. Everybody
reacts to your appearance as sort of now disabled.
Exactly, react to my appearance. Yeah. And what I'm finding is they do it in different ways. What's amazing is that some people don't know how to interact, or they can't look you in the eyes. And I get that, they're a little bit not sure what to say. But what's even more amazing is that far more people come up and want to share really personal events that have happened to them with me, which I was never expecting. For some reason, I think if people know that you've gone through something really traumatic, it makes them more willing to share with you. And I'm a journalist. I spent my entire career trying to get people to share with me. And now it turns out that so many more people want to do so. But it was just fascinating to learn about how people react to you differently. And that's, has been a learning curve as well.
Talk about the word resolute. You say that we all have it. What do you mean?
Yeah, I really think that it's absolutely inside everyone. And finding it isn't necessarily that easy, but that if you are just able to remind yourself and work at it, that you can get to absolutely anything. And Resolute, I picked the title because it's not just an easy sense of everyone has resilience. Being resolute means you do have to focus and work on it. You can't just get through anything difficult just by hoping it'll get away. You've got to work through it, and you've got to focus on getting through it. And I think that's what's so key for anyone who's going through anything traumatic. And look, I know, Sally, you said earlier, you sounds horrific. You rolled down a canyon.
It pretty much was.
But the book is written also for people. It isn't injuries like mine. If you have financial problems or families with your family, or you have anxiety, I actually think that the very same methods can be used to try and get through them. And look, I lay out in each chapter specific moments in my life, and then I talk about and my recovery, and I laid out what my thought process was, and I break it down into sort of a few more, but basically trust, adapt, and embrace. First of all, the most important thing is to trust and know that you have the resilience in you to get through to the other side. And that even though things might be difficult, if you keep persevering, you will get through it. Then you have to learn to adapt. Look, things will not be different if you've gone through something traumatic. Your relationships would have changed. In my case, my body has changed. But you adapt. You identify the things you can no longer do, and then you find other ways of doing them. And you can adapt to almost anything. And just, again, that requires thought. You think about what you can't do or what you need to get around, and you find and you evaluate and you find ways of doing so. And then perhaps most importantly, embrace. Because you know what? life is a real journey, and you better get used to enjoying the highs and the lows, because then you are really experiencing a full life. And I think that being scared and running from them and hiding from them, as we said earlier, is the worst thing to do. So I now say that I honestly think that I'm a stronger person. I have gone through some of the most difficult moments, and I was absolutely broken through pain and through questioning what it was going to be like. And I lay out some of the difficult moments in the book, but I am so much stronger because of it. And there isn't a challenge that I don't face now that I don't say, bring it on, bring it on. Like,
That's cool.
It doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It just
Right.
means I know that I will find a way through it somehow. And and you know, it's the more difficult scenarios you go through, the easier the next one becomes. And
Wow.
and I've just been, I consider myself lucky to know that now and to have experienced that.
Well, the Bible talks about you and consider it pure joy when you face trials and tribulations of many kinds, because the testing of your faith produces endurance. That's what you're talking about.
Good.
Yeah.
Well,
Faith
and Cankle Fritz, you and your wife Becky know a little something about that.
Yeah, we recently lost our daughter in June. She was diagnosed with multiple disabilities. She had cerebral palsy. She was non-ambulatory. She was in a wheelchair all her life. And it's like taking care of a 3-month-old for 21 years.
Yeah,
And I have
was
found that
21.
she was 21, yeah. But I have found that people have been through tough stuff. You're right. There is a different level as opposed to people that haven't, a little more surfacey, but there is, I think you can find some resolution, some inner strength in people that have been through difficult things like you have.
Yeah, I've got a podcast. It's called Searching for Heroes, and I've spoken to some people who have lost their children before, and I do think that it is perhaps, it is a loss that I don't understand. I think it is a loss on another level, actually.
It is, yeah.
So I because that is something like my injuries are my injuries. Like I can get through them, but I do think, and I do, the loss of a child is, I don't know, it's something I can't necessarily talk about because I have no experience in that. And so my thoughts and my prayers are with you and your family, and of course for your daughter as well.
I appreciate that. So you talk about, along with the trauma, more than 20 surgeries, painful rehab, you say the reconstituted whole band is better, stronger, a more joyful person than you used to be.
Yeah, totally. I think it's up by about over 40 surgeries now, and I still keep having them.
Wow.
I had one just again, another one a few months ago. But yeah, I mean, look, as I said, Pierre, Sasha, the two Ukrainians are no longer with us, and I just think that my only way of moving forward is to know that life is an incredible place, and I've learned so much through it that I want to try and harness that as best as possible. And so many people came out to help me that if I can in turn pass that on and help other people, well, then that I think is probably the great thing that you can do with your life. And so I suppose that's why I wrote the book as well. I hope that it can help some people. And many people reached out to me after the first book as well, and they said they were going through something difficult, that they'd had injuries, that they were going through difficult times, and reading my book really helped them. And that, I think, is probably what has made me a sort of a happy, more content person. I feel that I've tried to use it to the best of possibility that I can. So, yeah, the band is back together and pretty strong.
Do you feel like you're more of a joyful person because now this is giving you another purpose?
Yes, the purpose, trying, and I don't talk too greatly about, I'm just helping lots of people. If I am, I am. I'm happy to do that. But that's actually, there's not always joy in that, because helping people often means you're talking to someone who's gone through something pretty difficult. And it's about when it comes to helping people, it's not about giving them joy. It's about trying to just show them that there is something positive to come after it. Being resilient, for example, doesn't mean that everything is easy. In fact, being resilient just means you can get through the difficult moments and you know there's something on the other side. Like, being resilient doesn't mean that you're joyful. Being resilient just gives you an understanding that, you know what, we will fight through this and we will get through it. And so helping people doesn't necessarily give me joy, it gives me satisfaction. But joy is an interesting word to use there. But I'm grateful if I'm able to help someone.
You talk about your faith. There's a chapter called The Bigger Thing. I cannot imagine even trying to get through what you've been through without faith to cling to. Was that a big influence, I imagine, in your recovery?
Well, look, I tell you what is so fascinating is my relationship with God at the moment. Like, I was raised a strict Catholic. I went to a monastery, and, that's how I was raised. And once I started sort of covering conflicts, my relationship with faith went on a bit of a journey. And I was in the Middle East a lot, and at some point, I was asking, I think many people do when they're in their 20s or so, they start asking themselves, what is their relationship with God and with religion? Shouldn't everyone have a moral backbone? Do I need religion to tell me that? And I went on a journey with it. And there were times when I was incredibly religious, and there were times when I said, I'm not sure how I feel about Catholicism anymore. But when I was injured and I was lying on the ground, first of all, I thought about my family. And then right after that, I spoke to God. And when everything else was taken away, when I was lying there, I said, please, Lord, please, God, get me home. And since then, I've known that it was always in me, that it never went, that I went on a journey and I questioned it and I was talking about it, but it never disappeared. It was always deep inside me. And I have since then been rebuilding my relationship with God. And I find there nothing more amazing than sitting in church. And there was an interesting experience when I was in hospital, because I was passing the chapel every day. I mean, I was in ICU for the first month, 6 weeks. I couldn't leave my room. It was really tricky. But once they let me out and wheeled around the hospital, I kept passing the chapel, and it took me a while to go in. I wasn't sure if I was ready to have religion and God be a part of my recovery, or how I felt it, or the questions of how could God allow this to happen. And I was asking myself these questions, and finally one day I said, I'm going to go in. I got to go in. The truth is, there was a very long line at the canteen next to the chapel on this military base. No, honestly. And I said, okay, today I'm going to go in. And, it's that simple moment of sitting there reminded me of why I loved it and was so close to it when I was a kid. Because you go in there and all the worries that you have in the world, in our daily life, disappear. I feel for me that sitting in there is a really, really pure place where all the worries and the thoughts of the world don't really matter that much. You've got a direct one-on-one opportunity to talk to God, and also to talk to Pierre and Sasha, which I used that opportunity to do as well in that first time. And so ever since then, I have been talking to God all the time. And, I quote what my favorite psalm was in the book, Psalm 23, and the end of it just goes, you all know this. It's, yea, though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me, thy staff and thy crook. And I just thought back to, I walked in the shadow of death. I was there, and I never felt any evil. I was so close to death, and I felt that those lines just came alive for me. Yea, though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil. And that line just gives me so much strength now. Because even if it's not walking in the shadow of death, and the difficult moments that I encounter, or difficult, tough times, I say those lines to me. And I said, I shall fear no evil. There is no evil that will come to me, because I will fight it away. And I just think that everyone's relationship with God is fascinating, and the journey that it takes you on. And I think that, your faith can disappear, but it can always be brought back. And God is always waiting there with his arms wide open for you to come back to him. I was in Paris a few days ago, and I was at Notre Dame at the cathedral. And again, I saw this cathedral that had been burnt to the ground, but it has been built back up, bigger, stronger, more beautiful. And that's what happens. You can get knocked down, your faith can get knocked down, and you can be injured, but you can build it back up. You can be stronger. You can be better. And I don't think you can get that from anywhere other than family and God. I think those two, faith and family, for me, I just think are what makes us special.
I love that. Speaking of family, tell us about the Bible that your dad gave you.
Yeah. Well, I remember for my first Holy Communion, I was given a Bible, and a beautiful black leather Bible, and I sat down and I read it throughout. It took me, years, I think, a couple of years, but I remember doing that. It was the first time, even though I had been raised a Catholic and I was going to, we had Mass 5 times a week, prayers twice a day, benediction twice a week, but actually it was when I was picked up and chose to read the Bible that it seemed to mean a lot more than just when I was just going to church, because it was just what we all did. When I made the decision to start reading it on my own, that I really felt special, and I read, and I continue to, and I've still got that Bible today. So there's, like I said, I didn't see that Bible for many years until I went and found it again. But again, that's your journey with faith. It can be the biggest part of your life, and then you can drift away from it, and then it can be the biggest part of your life, and you just got to keep coming back to it, and in small steps as well. Sometimes, I speak to some people who have left their religion, and I say, don't start going to church every day. Just say a prayer tonight. Just say a 20-second prayer. Just sit in silence for 10 seconds and think of it, bit by bit. It's not, people shouldn't feel that they want to get back to religion, so they just must jump in and start doing it all. You can go back to it slowly. Don't think that people can be afraid of that too. So bit by bit, piece by piece, you can rebuild it.
It's encouraging.
Yeah.
Well, this book, Resolute, How We as Humans Keep Finding a Way to Beat the Toughest Odds, it's all about story. And what is your goal? What is your message that you pray that we all get through this?
Well, I hope, as I've been saying, that there are some people who just want an extra gear, who might not know how they're going to find their way through something difficult. And they will read my book, and hopefully it will give them that incentive. It'll push them a little bit. I also want people to enjoy the book. I've tried to write it as a book that will read well and that can be a page turner. So it's not it's certainly not I've often said that, I'm not a psychologist. I wanted to write about resilience, but I could only do so by writing about stories of myself and what I've gone through. So I've tried to write the book as for someone who will enjoy reading it, and hopefully they can learn lessons along the way as well. So I guess I'd like to do both of those.
I like that. Thank you, Benjamin, for your time. It's been a pleasure. This has been fascinating. Again, this is the book right here, Resolute, How We as Humans Find Ways to Beat the Toughest Odds. And if people want to find out more about you, so you got a podcast?
Got a podcast. It's called Searching for Heroes. We're filming a series on Fox at the moment called American Exceptionalism. And there we will go around communities in America that have been hit really hard, but pull themselves together and come out stronger. We just did a town in Kentucky that had been really badly hit. The coal mines all shut. It was not a flood, knocked it all down. The opioid crisis hit it, but wow, they've come back bigger, better, stronger, and it's amazing. So we're going to be telling stories like that as well. And those are the two things that I'm focusing on at the moment, and just continuing to tell people stories, because by sharing stories of people who have gone through difficult moments, we can all learn. And I think that's potentially how we can all help each other. So that's really what I'm focusing on. I'm just trying to tell more stories of uplifting stories. And I spent my whole career talking about conflict and war. And one of the big changes is that actually I now say, I want to go tell stories of people who have gone through the worst and have come out stronger the other side. And you do get lots of the stories in war, by the way, but I'm focusing on telling those stories now.
I love that. Just one more question. You're a war correspondent. You interview people. What's it like being interviewed?
We have to qualify that by the morning show. Little, how crazy we are.
I mean, I don't mind it. At first I did, because I'm a journalist to tell other people's stories. So that's what I do. Yeah. And at first I thought, well, I'll just keep telling my story and talking about me. But since you get responses from people who say, I heard your story and it helped me and I really enjoyed it and it gave me a bit of a boost, then that's worth it. And then I'm more than happy to talk, and I enjoy talking. Now, my wife, Alicia, would tell you that I talk about nothing but me. So...
I love her already.
That's awesome.
We always joke, she's like, you.
I think your wife and my wife would get along real well. That's funny. This guy on the radio can't go right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny.
That's good.
That's awesome.
That's good.
Well, thank you for your time. This has been really good.
Thank you so much.
It's a great pleasure. So nice to meet you all, and thank you. And keep praying and keep doing your amazing work as well. It helps.
Thank you.
Amen. God bless. Appreciate that.